All right, and welcome to podcast number 75. Thanks for tuning in. This week I'm going to be talking to my friend David Fodel. Now I wanted to provide an intro just to let you know why I picked Dave. First of all, it's because he's an amazing artist, and I'm really glad to give him a little bit of the spotlight and also to find out about what kind of background turns you into a guy like him. But it's also time sensitive. He does the development of events and festivals and stuff, and he's been working with the University of Colorado in Denver for this Performing Arts Week. And on Thursday, April 16th, he has invited me to work with Janet Feder, an amazing guitarist, in a wonderful place called Emmanuel Gallery on the campus of UCD. So if you happen to be somewhere in the Denver area, I'll be playing from roughly 7:45 till 8:45, although the fun commences at 6 o'clock. Other performers, there's interaction with students. We've got students that are doing visuals. So I hope that if you have an opportunity, you'll stop by and take a listen, take a watch, and touch base with me if you come in, okay? Other than that, here's my chat with Dave. All right, this week we are meeting with a friend of mine. David Fodel is somebody that I actually first met. I first met him when I moved into town. I met him around the scene a little bit, but I mostly first met him when I started interacting with the University of Denver. He was at the time a student, as we like to call him, adult learner. And then as I moved into my adult learner phase, he and I were kind of going to school at the same time. Got to do a couple of little projects together. Then he went off to his professional career, and he's been doing some really cool stuff. We'll let him kind of talk about those things, but I hope he's going to talk about his festivals. I think he will. But with that, we'll say hello to Dave. Hi, Dave. How are you?
Hey, Darwin. I'm doing great, man.
Thanks so much for taking the time out of your schedule to being able to do this.
It's a pleasure. I'm thrilled to be able to be talking to you and to be part of the podcast series.
Well, I'm actually really thrilled to be talking to you. I mean, you are one of the most multimedia artists that I know, and so I'm really anxious to get to learn more about some of your background stuff. But let's kick this off by kind of introducing the things that you do to people. So what are sort of the projects that you identify yourself with?
You know, that has become an increasingly difficult question for me to answer. I guess primarily, I say that I'm a electronic media artist, and that's sort of the big blanket thing. Depending on who I'm talking to, I'll say, if they just sort of glaze over and don't know what that is, I will say, I use video and sound, and sometimes it's in a performative setting, sometimes it's an installation, sometimes kind of a hybrid between the two, where I am installing a work in a particular location with the intent of then performing a version of the same work so that it kind of has a performative component to it, but yet it is also designed to be kind of an audiovisual immersive experience to some degree or another. I like to characterize the work as kind of taking elements of the invisible world and making them visible, or visible also to our ears perhaps, but it's not always the same. So that's why I said it's difficult sometimes to really characterize the work. I like to work with electronics in the form of sound, in the form of visuals, physical computing in terms of, like, lately really been sort of spreading my sculpture wings, building components, doing much more kind of installation-based work where there are real physical elements that are present in the space as opposed to just sort of screen or projection-based stuff. So yeah, I'm kind of all over the map at this point. I'm really sort of searching for my middle-aged identity here.
That's funny. Well, one of the things I'll say, so where we've been interacting with just recently is in preparation for this gathering of some sort. I don't know, what do you call these things? It's sort of like an event, right? I guess we could call it an event.
Yeah.
But as part of that, I'm working with a group of your students, and the more I found out about these students, and especially then when I met them, I was kind of blown away with what you're doing there. You're actually working with a group of sculpture students, working with them to do media art, right?
Yeah. And what we've done, so this is at the University of Colorado, Denver. I have been working with Rian Karain there, who is the department head in the sculpture department. And they've actually over the years been trying to sort of build this thing that they're calling transmedia sculpture. I think it's their attempt to sort of bridge into the new media program kind of world. It's a small program, so there are some of the schools that have been doing this kind of electronic media stuff for a long time, and they have like departments for film and departments for animation.
Oh, sure, right.
You know, they got but for this program, it has somehow kind of gotten attached to the sculpture department. It's a way of trying to work with this media in a way that it really takes advantage of the spatial component of it. Sometimes it's site specific. Sometimes it's working with objects that incorporate electronics or sound or video. You know, so it's kind of is building from that. And this particular class that we're doing this, you know, this thing that you mentioned is called electronic performance.
Okay. Well, one of the things that I certainly immediately caught on to was that when you're working with sculptors, there's no sense that they want to work inside the box, right? For them, they'll do stuff inside the box, but if it also means like hanging some stuff off the ceiling, that's their game for that too. Need to make a bracket? Well, we'll just go and make a bracket. And it's so much different from working with kind of the traditional media artists who sort of like, you know, work in some Adobe product and make things that live in a rectangular frame.
Yeah, and I think for me that's what has been most exciting because, I mean, I don't have a traditional sculpture background. However, you know, as you mentioned, you know, I'm this what did you call it? The late life learner? Or
oh yeah, the adult learner.
The adult learner, yeah. So I have through my life been a very diversely employed kind of guy. So, you know, I've built a lot of things and so, you know, I'm fairly handy, but I don't have that kind of like real traditional sculpture background. And being thrust into a very traditional sculpture program, this is a sculpture program. They got wood shop, metal shop. They do iron casting, welding, the whole thing. You know, it was a little bit intimidating to be walking into a classroom where it's kind of like some of the students know more about the lab we're working in than I do. But it has been super cool to be able to, as you said, to be able to think about things in ways that aren't locked into this sort of computer-based framework. In fact, the computer for them is sort of, you know, just as I described how the sculpture lab is for me. For some of the students, they're just kind of like, oh God, I hate the computer, and you know, so then I feel like, oh, okay, cool. So now we have this little dialogue going where, you know, we're actually sharing some things. They feel like they have a level of expertise that they're bringing to the table, and I have, you know, this other side of that, and so the dialogue becomes almost that of, you know, colleagues, of equals, of, you know, artists working together collaboratively. And I just totally love that.
Yeah, you really must dig that. That's great. So one of the things I like to ask people when I talk to them is to tell me about their background and how they got to be the artists that they are. Over the years that I've known you, you've revealed very little about your past. It's come out in very tiny little tidbits here and there, and so I'm actually really curious to hear how you got to be the Dave that I know.
Yeah, well, I'm not really sure who the Dave is that you know, but yeah, well, we could go way back. Okay, so I really have no, you know, before I went to DU, to get my MFA, I had absolutely no formal art training at all. Like, I didn't even take a high school art class. I thought people that took art classes in high school it was just because they were bad at math.
Right.
So my background really is kind of a college dropout, punk rock kid from Southeast Baltimore who in the early 80s was into a lot of noise and really sort of underground electronics. Even the punk thing I thought was too pop or something.
Right.
I was into like Throbbing Gristle and Monty Kazaza and Survival Research Labs and that kind of whole scene, the industrial stuff. That was real interesting to me, and I was gravitating towards the sort of downtown Baltimore art music scene. It just so happens there is a very good art school in Baltimore, the Maryland Institute of College of Art, and I started hanging out with all those kinds of people and realizing that this is art. This isn't just like weird stuff that only comes out of my head. This is like a whole world, So I got immersed in that scene. I was doing sound for a lot of bands. I was doing my own experimentation with, tape looping and sort of no input sound with old tape decks and plugging them into themselves and getting all sorts of horrific, rich, amazing, wonderful noise out of it. And doing a little bit of performance work there, kind of got my first exposure to being an organizer. I put together a lot of events at a place called Our House in Baltimore I don't know, I guess it was around 1985, and basically figured out how to be that guy that could make something happen, pull together a lot of people, somehow avoid being arrested and and make a little bit of rent money, So, and from there, I met the woman who is now my wife, Stacy B, in that whole scene, and we started doing live audiovisual stuff together right in that same time frame as part of the sort of Our House parties. We were doing hand-painted Codalith slides with a couple of slide projectors, and we didn't have a dissolve unit, so we just took pieces of cardboard and would move them in front of the lenses to get the images to dissolve over one another. And it was kind of a ghetto version of like Joshua Light show or whatever.
What time? What was the time frame of this? What years was this that you started doing this? Your ghetto tech AV.
This was probably 85, 86.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then shortly thereafter, we moved out to Boulder. We got pregnant, and I was living in a warehouse, and I'm not sure, that was really the best place to raise children. So, right. So we bought a Volkswagen bus and we headed out across the country and somehow landed in Boulder. And once we hit Boulder, we, I kind of was just looking for like, what's going on here? How do I keep being this guy? I like to connect with people. I like sort of, making things happen, and so I kind of fell in with a bunch of people here, and we decided to start a newspaper. So we started this underground arts newspaper called Texture Magazine, and it served as a wonderful way to really connect with the community, as well as sort of a locus for operations and a way to sort of gel different projects around that. So we started. Bunch of the people that were involved with the newspaper were also involved with KGNU Radio, which is I'm sure you're familiar with, is right. Incredible community resource. One of the top sort of public radio, community radio stations in the country, I would guess. And so we were doing some little events with them, and there was music and kind of craziness and sort of like happenings in a way. And so that was sort of the early Boulder excursions into similar stuff. We kind of got involved in the early rave scene in Boulder. And then we started an internet radio station. We were broadcasting all electronic music. That was called Radio Valve. That was that was 97 or 98 that we started that. We were one of the early internet radio broadcasters, and again, that sort of connected me into an even broader network of people. We started throwing events associated with that, and then we did not manage to become the billionaires that we hoped from our internet venture. Then I sort of dropped out for a little bit and kind of went into corporate reality and worked the corporate thing. As I had gained a lot of skills in electronic media production, just self-taught, a lot of electronic pre-press and video editing. And when the web thing hit, I started doing, kind of translating people's brochures from print to the web, and doing all that kind of stuff, and ended up becoming a traveling consultant for a database publishing software company, and did that for a number of years, flying all over the place. And so at that point, my artistic thing was sort of sitting dormant, more or less. Had done some things with Brian Kane, who you may know. He's one of the founding members of Emergency Broadcast Network.
Oh yeah.
And he and I and another guy, E23, Brian Comerford, who was a guy that was also part of the radio station. We did sort of a laptop touring thing in 99, 2000. 3 laptops, two of us. We had Ableton version 1 or something. Right. And we had that linked together. We were just doing crazy synchronized beats, and Brian Kane was doing jitter-based video stuff, real-time, crazy cut-up stuff. We did that for a while, and then at a certain point, I just kind of I couldn't deal with the corporate thing anymore, and so I told my wife, I think I want to go back to school, and I think I want to teach. I want to try and get my MFA and get a teaching gig. And she's a high school art teacher, and she gets summers off. And so I thought, hey, this is the thing. This is what we should do. We'll both have teaching jobs. We'll both have summers off. It'll be awesome. And so that's essentially where I met you, is when I went back to DU to get the MFA. And since then, that tenure track job has not materialized, but things are good. Anyway, that's sort of the background. I think that's how I kind of ended up where I am right now.
Well, it's kind of interesting because you're actually tracking a lot of the things that, as we look back, are the groundwork that led us to where we are. Kind of the punk scene as it split into all these little cells of, some of it being power pop, but the other half of it being, drills on a guitar pickup. That's a real influential thing for where we're at with a lot of our experimentalism now. Your involvement in the rave scene. Kind of, I really remember that time frame where just trying to find a way to put everything we could get our hands on the net, and sharing it with all of these friends that we first met on the net, and all that kind of stuff was so vital and such an amazing thing. But I want to focus on something specific, which is this: when you moved here and you started this magazine, this texture magazine.
Yeah.
I didn't know that you were involved in that. And that was one of those things that was like, it was a ton of cred thing. And so you said that it opened a lot of doors for you. In what way did you need to do that in order to get involved in the scene? I mean, how hard is it to just move into a city and just say, all right, I'm here, let's rock, I guess, especially if you're going to try and do events. I mean, for me, I show up in a place, but it's sort of like, I don't speak to humans very often. I mostly just, type things via email or whatever. So I tend to not feel like I have to meet a bunch of people. But especially if you're planning on doing events or you're getting involved with collaborative performance and stuff, you need to find people. You need to find your people.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think, in some ways, there was something of a void, and I don't know if it was just sort of timing or what, but that was also the time where, like, the whole self-publishing and the zine kind of phenomena was really gelling, and this was when we started the magazine. It was probably, let's see, we moved to Boulder in '87, so that was probably '88.
Okay.
So self-publishing was pretty solidly a thing at that point. And, Boulder, there was a pretty cool scene, like Penny Lane Coffee House and a lot of, like people just constantly coming through,
Right.
and Boulder was kind of a different place then. And so, so the first thing I did was I went to the university, to CU Boulder, and I went to they had a video art class, and I went to the instructor. It was Janice Tanaka. I just said, I'm just going to take your class. I'm not going to pay for it. I just want to sit in on the class and just see what's going on and see, I've done a lot of guerrilla video kind of stuff, and I had, it's like in Baltimore, that was like, I was doing video stuff. It was really difficult to get a hold of like Portapacks and stuff, but I somehow had managed to do that. Like, actually, it was the same sort of deal. I went to UMBC and I just took the class without paying for it. And I was just like, I'm going to do this. And I don't know, people they didn't turn me away. Maybe they just liked that I was ballsy enough to show up and just say, I'm going to do this. But anyway, so when I got into that class and I started just kind of meeting some people in the class, I just sort of followed the cool or whatever, like that person looks like they're connected to some scene, they're like, he said something like he's in a band. So I'm going to say, well, what band is that? And where do you guys play? Oh, okay. You play here. So you show up, just kind of insinuate myself into the scene. And it became apparent that people, if in a small town like Boulder, like you get these little factions, and like I said, the timing is such that like you can have these very fertile periods where everyone is collaborating and talking to one another, and then it sort of deteriorates into factionism and everybody is like pissed off at each other.
Right.
And I think that I showed up at a time where it was kind of like everybody was sort of, they had already been pissed off at each other, and now it was sort of like, well, now what's going to happen? Like we're just bored because like, we don't even have the energy to be pissed off at each other anymore. So I just kind of showed up and said, and people were just like, yeah, there's nothing really going on in Boulder now, and I was like, well, let's just make something happen then. And we just did. I think that they were excited about this new guy, I'm very, I'll just do everything. So I did. I just said, we're going to put on an event. And I just like did everything. I made the flyers. I talked to everybody. I booked people. We, went and talked to the venues and just basically working constantly to make things happen. And then you just prove it,
Right.
There it is. It happened. Like, and then there's your cred kind of, people were like, wow, he's not just bullshit.
It's not just blowing smoke, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's interesting, though, that you talk about, first of all, the timing of it. And, yeah, there's this funny... You really actually identified something which is really critical for, like, local art scenes, which is the way that they come together and there's a burst of energy, and then all of a sudden one person made a little bit more money on something, or one person got mentioned in a national magazine but nobody else did, or something like that. Next thing you know, everyone's like, they're a sellout, or
right.
That guy's such an asshole, right? And the end result is, everybody splits, and it's like groups of, there's one scene for every two people at that point. And so if you can be the guy that kind of drops in and says, yeah, okay, y'all can have that thing, but let's also do this thing all together. That's a powerful time to drop into a scene.
Yeah, and it seemed like that was maybe what it was. I don't, like I said, I did, I put a lot of effort in, but I, I don't know that there was anything particularly special about what I was doing,
Yeah. Well, one of the things I've seen in watching you pull things like this together is, first of all, you have a really good way of making things, kind of suggesting a direction or an idea without anyone feeling like that was your idea that they're going to develop, right? Instead, it's like, yeah, I have this idea too, and it's just like what you said, but now here's my idea. Somehow you like really you set up an open path for people to sort of bring their thing, and even if you make suggestions, it still remains their thing somehow, which is cool. And a lot of people can't do that.
Well, that feels really great to actually hear you say that, because it's not something I consciously do. I just, or maybe it's something that has sort of developed over the many years, sort of subconsciously or something, because I genuinely want people to do what they're into, and I want to genuinely help facilitate that, because at the end of the day, it's like, we're all here at this event and we've all worked towards this, and I don't want to put a bunch of effort into something that feels
not excellent
and not genuine, and you know what I mean? So it's kind of like you want to push it the way that you want it to go, but you also know that, like, if you make it just about you, then nobody's going to show up,
Right. Well, the other thing that I would say that you are really good at in the development of these things is you are a catalyst for a catalyst against inertia, right? So I've seen a lot of situations where there have been people that are, everyone will be sitting around in chairs going, yeah, I'd like to do something. And, someone else will be like, yeah, I'd like to do something too. You're the guy who stands up and says, okay, let's do it. What's the date? Where are we going to do it, right? Who else should we get involved? And then, a lot of times I'm also kind of involved in that second wave thing. So everyone's like, oh, who else should we get involved? And someone will throw names out, and you're the guy who gets on the phone and says, hey, we're going to do this thing. You want to do this thing? And I'll be like, yeah, I'll do that thing. That sounds great.
Yeah.
That seems to be something that really has to come from a lot of experience of doing this stuff. I mean, just to kind of know intrinsically, there are going to be enough people that are into this that if I just say, let's do it, a bunch of people will want to do it. I guess.
I think so. I think at this point, and I guess this would sort of be a nice way to sort of dovetail into like the MediaLive festival. There was always this, for me, this confidence in what I was curating, that I just knew, like, this is the shit.
Right.
This is important work, and we have to show this. And I just never felt any sort of hesitation with essentially any of the people that I invited. And in talking with everybody that I invited, it just felt like I was almost just like talking to friends, like, hey, we're doing this thing. Love to have you. What do you think? Like, if you look back at my email chains, I sometimes would look at how the museum would craft their introduction email, and it's very formal and lengthy, and I'm just like, hey, love your stuff, doing this festival in November, are you in? That kind of, and it's just like 3 lines, and people were like, oh, sounds really cool, like, what are the details, or yeah, I'm free, or whatever it is, and it's just very conversational, and it just, maybe there's part of that people respond positively to, that's just like, oh, this this is a guy that kind of gets it. Like he's not, he's not like some administrator. He's like one of us sort of thing.
Yeah, I think that that's actually a really big part of it. There's not a sense you're an administrator trying to fill a invitee card, right?
Right.
Because I feel like a lot of times shows are done that way. It's sort of like, all right, well, if we have these 3 names on the invitation, then we're going to get, the 15% response rate that's going to translate into this much money. My sense when you're doing stuff is you're like, I'm really excited to get these people in, and it really gets communicated even through these minimalist emails. This thing like, let's go, love your work, I'm doing this thing, let's rock.
Yeah, I think that has to be part of it, and maybe there is some of that comes from having done this for a long time. It's like, hey man, we don't have a lot of time to be messing around here, like you're in or you're not, like when we're moving forward, and there's a sense of not necessarily like we're rushing, but there's a sense of like, confident, sort of positive urgency that like doing this thing, and I want you to be part of it, and I would like to think that at this point people can trust that what I'm trying to do, like that I'm going to take care of the artists. Right. And that has been a definite focus of mine, at least, probably the past 5 years, is like, and certainly through MediaLive, like we take care of the artists. We pay them, we put them up in a nice place, we try to create an environment where the artists have some time to be together. They're not being rushed from one speaking engagement to to their performance, and then now it's a workshop, or there's time for them to kind of engage with one another on a more personal level. And I would hope that's kind of the reputation, or the feeling that people are left with after being part of something I'm involved with.
Right. So we've kind of talked a little bit here about MediaLive. Let's talk about it more specifically. So for those people who don't know, there will be a lot of them listening to this podcast, MediaLive it's more than an event, but so what do you call, see, I don't even know what the names of these things are. So what is it? The MediaLive...
It's a small festival, like...
Okay, all right.
Yeah, so it's a 3-day festival. It is produced by the Boulder Museum of Contemporary Art, and we do performances on 2 evenings. On one day, we will have a panel discussion and informal sort of artist interactions with whoever shows up, and then on the 3rd day, we have workshops. So it's a fairly common format, really, for small festivals that are sort of new media festivals that have at least some performative component. And right. There are tons of these things all over the world, as I'm sure you well know.
Yeah, I'm always scared though to call something a festival, because that makes it sound like it's going to be, some equivalent of Bonnaroo or something. And
yeah,
I don't want to leave that impression,
or something like that. Yeah,
right. But certainly, like the way you do it is typical, but also it's a format that I really enjoy, because you also kind of limit the number of artists, so that if you're involved in the festival, you're going to end up having some personal interaction with these artists, which is really great. Yeah,
and I think part of that is by necessity, and part of it is by design. Certainly because of me and the way that I tend to get myself involved with all of the details of things. I'm not necessarily like a micromanager, but I also kind of know that like stuff falls through the cracks unless somebody is paying attention. So I tend to be that person that's paying attention. So I know that like anything longer than 3 days, and I'm going to be out of gas. So there's a certain amount of that was geared towards like, I think we really, and the involvement of the staff at BMOCA, which has been fantastic over the years. It's the same thing for them. They have a very small staff and limited resources. So the 3-day thing certainly is I think, designed with that in mind.
It's kind of their limit as well. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And the past 2 years, we've also built this partnership with the Atlas Institute, which is part of CU Boulder, and they have this huge immersive black box theater. Well, it's not really huge, but it's bigger than BIMOCA, and it certainly is outfitted for a different kind of performative environment, much more immersive. And their involvement, they have a great technical staff, so they tend to be the one evening's staffing for a set of performances. And what's cool about that is that we have, typically on like opening night, we'll do it at BIMOCA. It's an intimate environment. We can curate it such that the work that really works well in a small space that is all about being up close and being sort of on a flat plane with the work. The audience and the work are on the same plane. Right. That all happens that night. Then on the next night, it'll be in that it's in that more sort of immersive theater environment where you are distanced from the work to some degree. Last year we had the light surgeons, and I don't know if you've ever seen one of their performances, but it's just like, it's overwhelming. It's huge. It's theatrical and pretty overwhelming and immersive, and it was fantastic. But you couldn't do that at BIMOCA space.
Right.
So I think having the contrast of those two things works really well for the festival, because what we're trying to do is present work that is being done. When you say it's about audiovisual performance, what does that even mean? That's like, it's such a huge expanse that we try to kind of pick some things that can showcase everything from sort of, generative media to narrative kind of cinematic stuff to theatrical performative stuff to much more kind of screen-based material to things that are much more about like, the interface and sort of the device fetishism kind of thing. Right. But we try to cover all of that in each festival and have like one or two artists that can plug into each of those kind of subgenres or whatever you call it. And so having those two venues is really helpful in being able to show the diversity in what's going on in that realm.
Sure. MediaLive has been going for how long now?
We are in our 4th year.
Okay. Looking at it from the outside, that it seems to be getting legs, and certainly once, when you were able to sort of like get the attention of the Atlas people, that helped a lot. The BIMOCA staff certainly knows how to engage their local community and the people that are tuned into them. But I noticed particularly last year, hearing about it in different circles, as if it was starting to get legs. And frankly, I saw that happen as Communikey, also out of Boulder, started off very slow, and now they're a force in that kind of art festival world. So, talking about MediaLive and talking about the work that you've done and putting together events and festivals and stuff, what I see is you're a person that really activates the artistic and musical people in your area. And so that almost by definition means it's something that, I think we would all like more people to kind of get out of their chairs and do. My question for you is, what advice would you have for someone who hears this and says, maybe I could do a festival? What would be your advice about getting started down that path?
To go ahead and do it. I mean, seriously, the things that I think one needs to just make something happen, you have to just connect with people. I think the first thing is to sort of get out into the community and see what is going on, to get a feel for who is doing what. it's almost in a way kind of like market research. You're sort of getting a sense of what is happening so that you are not duplicating someone else's efforts. If there's already a certain kind of an event or a series or a venue that's already doing this kind of a stuff, well, then by you doing it, you're really just saying, like, I'm not really paying all that much attention. I didn't know that was happening. So, so kind of doing your homework a little bit, but not letting that get in the way of what it is you really want to do. If somebody's doing it and it's down the street, you can do it in your town. One example of that is, I started a little DorkBot chapter here in Lafayette. We're just outside of Boulder. We have this changing community. So I just decided, yeah, let's just do a DorkBot. That'll be cool. It's like, it's easy to do. It's very informal. It's fun. And then people show up, and then you start to see, like, who lives here? Well, so that's kind of a thing. The DorkBot thing is a simple thing to do. But, you go to your local cafe and you see what they have going on. That's usually like, oh, you got open mic night, and then on Thursday, oh, well, we don't really have anything happening on Thursday. Well, hey, I know a couple of friends of mine, and we have this thing we like to do. We do this art thing with weird electronic music and blinking lights or whatever it is, and we'll come in and we'll do it. It won't cost you anything. I notice you have a sound system here that you use on your open mic night. We can just plug into that. And, so you I think the key thing is to make it as painless as possible for whatever venue you're going to approach. And I would guess that, people that are thinking that they want to do this sort of a thing, they already have some technical skills. They can just show up and plug in and do their thing. You clean up, you're nice, you're courteous, you say please and thank you, and then you're out of there, and everyone's just like, oh, that was really simple, that was easy. I would let those guys come back and do it again. And I think that's been part of my, whatever, if you want to call it, success, is just that people gain a trust in that, like, if you're going to be involved, it is going to be a quality event, and it's not going to be a nightmare.
Right. That's incredible. Well, and certainly one thing you're never going to learn in art school is to say please and thank you, or to leave a clean campsite when you leave. That's something they never seem to talk about. They never get to that part of the gig, right?
Yeah. That's true. There's a lot of things that I did not learn in art school.
Right. Because of the work that you do with all these gatherings and events and festivals, because of the work that you do in your teaching practice, and just all of your personal artwork, and I certainly would suggest for people to just you have davefodel.com, right? Yeah. So if people can go and check out some of the work, you've done stuff all over the map, but all of it seems to have a voice, which is interesting. That means that, your soul is getting in there, and that's cool. What do you see for the future? What do you see for your future? And what do you think you see for kind of, in general, the future of the art world?
God.
I always love that, because people always just grimace when I ask that question.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you're going to hold me to this one, aren't you?
Well, okay. So I think the interesting thing about, like, when you say the art world, it's kind of like a meaningless term. Because, like, the art, there's so many art worlds, I think. And that's one thing that I think that my experience in going back to school and getting the MFA and being sort of immersed in the sort of academic strain of the art world, that showed me some things. And it showed me an interesting strain of, certainly, I think, American art. And maybe it's an international thing as well, obviously, but academia is this place that I still don't know if I understand it. Like, it exists in its own little world, and it doesn't necessarily have to answer to anyone else. And I don't know if that's a good thing, or sometimes it's very frustrating, because I'm sort of part of that and sort of not part of that. And I feel like that, you look back at sort of like the the trajectory of avant-garde, or kind of like the artists that thought they were doing something to change the world, all of those people sort of ended up in academia like in the 60s and 70s, and now they're like the establishment. It's like that revolutionary stance, or that, whatever you want to call that, like we're making a difference kind of a stance, is like institutionalized. I don't know if that's, I'm certainly not talking about the future. I don't know what I'm talking about, really. For my work, what I'm finding is that I'm retreating into the things that really just kind of feed me. I'm building devices, and I'm kind of rekindling my love of noise is kind of making a big comeback for me. There was a while there where I was trying to do what I thought was the right thing to do in order to kind of make a career for yourself as an academic artist or something. But so I think I'm feeling positive about just doing this stuff that I'm doing, and meeting a lot of cool people through things like MediaLive and the other festivals and shows that I'm involved with, and just trying to keep it genuine and stay connected with something that really feels like it has some, I don't know, cred to it,
Sure. Well, again, I would say that while I talk about you as being one of the most multimedia of artists, all the stuff you do seems to come from a place, and it's a place that's related to music, and it's a place that's related to sort of like dystopian hackerism, right? And or at least that's the way I see it. And the fact that I've known your stuff enough that if I could see something and it was yours, I would probably have a sense that it was yours, So there's that voice thing too.
Well, that's great to hear, because that's one of the things that you
hope for, yeah.
That you hope for as an artist, yeah. That there's something that kind of comes through, that people can recognize the work and say, yeah, that's I know that guy's stuff.
Well, I want to thank you for your time. This has been a lot of fun. I've learned an awful lot about you, and
well, I'm glad. I'm really thrilled that you asked me to do it, and hopefully that is like entertaining and interesting to your audience. So
it certainly was for me. So I think everyone will appreciate it, and who knows, maybe you'll be the catalyst to getting other people to start doing festivals of their own. That would be pretty cool.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
All right. Well. Thanks so much for your time, and I will catch you again soon.
Okay, thanks, man.
All right, and there is the show. Thanks a lot for listening again. Thanks so much to Dave for taking the time. As you can tell from just hearing his story, really busy guy. He's got his fingers in a lot of pies, and he's also constantly putting out new artwork. I happened to see something over at the Emmanuel Gallery when we were first scoping out the place. Again, if you're going to be in the Denver area on April 16th, 2015, please swing by the Emmanuel Gallery on the Aurora Center of UCD. Thank you for listening, and other than that, have a great week, and I'll talk to you next time around.